one of the things about the trans rights movement is it's so incredibly homophobic. The idea that like a lesbian can have a penis is pure homophobia. And then also you've seen what recently happened after October 7, which was an extraordinary convulsion of anti-Semitism around the world. And it's not just anti-Semitism, it's unembarrassed
Yes.
anti-Semitism.
Yes.
It's anti-Semitism that's not ashamed of showing its face.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's because I think that all these old ancient prejudices have been given a shine by the internet, memes and stuff like that. They just make it feel new. They make it feel like these people are stepping outside the norm. But it's like, no, you're not. You're just doing what people have done for forever. You're hating Jews, you're hating women, and you're hating gay people.
Hello and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop.
I'm Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer. So, big news. You may not know this, but you can ask Alexa where to book a holiday for you. She'll just take it all out of your hand. You just have to give her the parameters. It's kind of like AI, you know. And I asked Alexa, I said, Alexa, send me on a trip, send us on a trip, right? Somewhere like the Northern Ireland of my youth, you know, the Northern Ireland I grew up in, you know, only with more sun, you know, more sun, brighter, you know. And you won't believe where she's chose to send us and where we are going.
We'll bring you more of that in a moment.
It'll be very interesting. You won't.
And we interview one of the greatest comedy writers of our time about how he lost his career and livelihood because he wanted to state loud and clear that men are men and women are women. It shouldn't seem to be that controversial, but this man's whole life was destroyed by it. So we're going to bring you that incredible interview.
Yeah.
But first, Phelim.
Yes. So yeah, I said to Alexa, as I say, Northern Ireland of my youth, more sun. So she has chosen to send us to. Where are we going now?
So we're going to Israel. And
to Israel.
so when you see us next on the podcast, that's where we will be reporting from.
Yes. It's important. I mean, joking aside, and I suppose I shouldn't be joking.
Beyond joking aside, and actually, I'm going to. I'll definitely sober this thing up very quickly by quoting from Sam Harris, who wrote a really great piece in the Free Press. And basically, I'm going to read a little bit of this because it'll certainly sober this conversation up very quickly. In the wake of the Hamas October 7th attack, it's important to keep in view the bright line that exists between good and a very specific form of evil. It's the evil of bad ideas so bad that can make even ordinary human beings impossible to live with. There's a piece of audio, and this is the extraordinary piece, and some of you have probably heard this before, but I think it's worth remembering. There's a piece of audio from October 7th that many people have commented on. It's a recording of a cell phone call that a member of Hamas made to his family while he was in the process of massacring innocent men, women and children. The man is ecstatic, telling his father and mother, I think brother, that he has just killed 10 Jews with his own hands. He had just murdered a husband and wife and was now calling his family from the dead woman's phone. Here's a partial transcript of what he said. Hi, Dad. Open WhatsApp now and you'll see all those killed. Look how many I killed with my own hands. Your son killed Jews. And his dad says, may God protect you. Dad, I'm talking to you from a Jewish woman's phone. I killed her, and I killed her husband. I killed 10 with my own hands. Dad, 10 with my own hands. Dad, open WhatsApp and see how many I killed. Dad, open the phone. Dad, I'm calling you on WhatsApp. Open the phone. Go, Dad. I killed 10 with my own hands. And it goes on like that. He makes one funny remark, by the way. This is the worst ad for WhatsApp that has ever existed.
Then he says, get mom on.
Yeah, get mom on. Mom, you need to open the WhatsApp. And of course, she's obviously an older person or whatever, and she has problems opening the WhatsApp. But what he goes on to say, which I think is extraordinary, Sam Harris says, he goes on to make a really good point. He said, can you imagine, he says, I'm just going to say this, as I told him, this is not typical, can you imagine if one of the American soldiers at the 𝙤𝙤𝙤 massacre had phoned home, can you imagine for a millisecond that they would have said something even remotely like that?
Yeah. Or even the Russians and Ukraine are supposed to be the most evil people in the world, whatever. Imagine them saying they wouldn't have said that. This is a special kind of hatred bred in there. I mean, what kind of, I suppose there's a universal here that everyone wants their parents to be proud of them. In this circumstances, their parents are proud of them because he has killed 10 Jews, women and children, and men, innocent men, women and children. Not 10 soldiers, 10 innocent civilians, including women and children.
And then the other point he makes, that Sam Harris makes, that I think is actually a really good one. He says, of course, all of this horror, and it's worth looking at and reading the whole piece. I'll put a link up in the show notes. Of course, all of this horror is compounded by the irony. This is a great point, by the way, that the Jews who were killed on October 7 were, for the most part, committed liberals and peace activists. Hamas killed the sorts of people who volunteer to drive sick Palestinians into Israel for medical treatments. They murdered the most idealistic people in Israel. They raped, tortured and killed young people at a trance dance music festival devoted to peace. Half of whom were probably on MDMA, he says, feeling nothing but the love for all humanity when the jihadists arrived. In terms of a cultural and moral distance, it's like the effing Vikings showed up at Burning Man and butchered everyone in sight. So that's where we're going, by the way. So we're going to Israel.
Because the story hasn't been reported properly.
It's been memory hold.
Yes, they're trying to make you forget what happened in Israel on October 7th. We want to remind you, and we want to remind the world what happened in Israel on October 7th. And so we're going to go and bring you those stories, and try and find a way to tell their stories in the best way we can. By the time you're seeing this, we'll hopefully be in Israel.
Yes.
Starting to gather stories. It's a long trip, but no problem. We're going there. So the next time you see us, we will be in Israel, and.
If ever there was an unreported story, the story of the victims is being memory hold by newspapers. I mean, the fact that every news program in the world isn't starting out every night by saying this is day whatever number it is at this point that the hostages have still been held, including babies, that is not the first item on the news is bizarre. And obviously the photographs and video of people all over America, certainly ripping down, and in the UK and other parts of Europe.
And on Abbot Kinney,
we saw them ourselves. We saw the results of what they had done, of ripping down the flyers that are alerting the world and reminding the world of the fact that these hostages are still being held. So our job of reporting the unreported is actually never been more important, because those stories are not being told by the mainstream media.
So we're going to tell them. When you think about it, there are children being held hostage. American children, by the way.
Yeah.
Irish children. There's an Irish girl, aged 8, being held hostage. Is it mentioned on the Irish news? Is it read out in Parliament? No, it's not. So we need to go there. These are unreported stories, and we're going to report them. So
before all that, we're going to go over to an interview we just did earlier with the great Graham Linehan.
He's a comedy writer. He's genius. He's one of the best comedy writers the UK has produced of the last 20 or 30 years. And he suddenly realised that I think he was pretty liberal. He suddenly realised there was something going on over there. See, over there, this trans thing is a bit weird. I might say something about that, but as he says, he did his research and said something, and his world collapsed. He was cancelled in a cruel, vicious way. He's written a book called Tough Crowd by Graham Linehan. We're going to put a link in the show notes. We're putting a link in the email we're sending out as well. If you're on our mailing list, you've got to buy this book. You've got to listen to this book.
Show support for this
Audible.
man.
You can get it on Amazon or on Audible or on Kindle. Graham Linehan, Linehan. It's called Tough Crowd. But we'll go over now to the interview. It's funny. It's a lot of fun. The interview. It's serious. He's a comedy writer. He's a great raconteur. You won't want to miss this interview. So please.
Have a listen.
To our next guest, well, he needs no introduction to the British, Irish, European viewers. To explain to our American viewers who Graham Linehan is, to give them more context. If you like Derry Girls, it's my theory, and I'd love to hear Graham's theory, and that Derry Girls is a poor remake of the great sitcom Father Ted from 1990s UK and Ireland. Anyone of our generation from the UK or Ireland knows Graham Linehan. He's most famously created Father Ted, which was a genius comedy about three priests living on an island.
Fictitious island.
And a fictitious island in Ireland. And I mean, we've a lot to talk about, but I do want to. I have a little bugbear that I think Derry Girls is a rip-off of Father Ted, but I'd be very interested to hear his thoughts on that. He also wrote The IT Crowd, wrote several other seminal sitcoms of the 90s and maybe the early 2000s. His life was great professionally and personally. He won all the awards, much loved, until it all went wrong. So that's what we're here to talk about. He's got a new book out called Tough Crowd, and it's about his rise and fall from the comedy world for speaking the truth. So welcome to the show, Graham.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Let's start at the beginning, I suppose, so that people get to know you. You're Irish. You started off as a journalist in one of the coolest newspapers in Ireland at the time, one of the coolest periodicals, and at a very interesting time in Ireland. How did that happen, and then how did you move to comedy writing?
Well, when I got into Hot Press magazine, which is the magazine you're talking about, there was a guy there. There was a guy working there named 𝙁𝙤𝙤 Matthews, who I immediately kind of realized was just extremely funny, hilarious human being, and we kind of bonded over I guess certain styles of comedy. There was a comic around the time called 𝘼𝙣𝙣, still exists, that was always very smart, but it was a kind of a combination of smart and stupid, and that for Arthur and me was the kind of sweet spot, something that was intelligent but almost deliberately silly and stupid. And we just kind of kept following that, or following what made us laugh. And we started doing this thing that I was kind of tangentially involved in, called the Joshua Trio, which was a parody of U2 that our friend Paul Woodfull did. And Arthur used to do Father Ted as a stand-up character. The joke I always tell, I tell this on every podcast, I'm sorry to repeat it here, but it's so good, I think it doesn't matter really. He said he used to come out and say to the audience, he'd be kind of treating them like they were in a church, we'd be at these gigs and he'd treat them like church announcements. And one time he said, if there's anyone at the back who can't see, say hello to them. They're from St. Kevin's School for the Blind. So, the little moments like there were things like that.
Just, the Joshua Trio, that's how cool you were, right? You were making fun of
the coolest band on the planet Earth.
Of the coolest band on Earth in a kind of underground. So that you were kind of part of the underground comedy scene in Dublin. Underground journalism scene. The Hot Press was what's known as the alternative media at the time.
It was like, I remember there was a regular kind of advice column about sex matters in Hot Press that was considered very racy, but we were always slightly embarrassed by it because it was a little too honest and too raw sometimes, and sometimes we didn't know where to look when that came out. But it was like, that was just an example of Niall Stokes, the editor, pushing against the times, which were still, the kind of Catholic Church's tendrils. They weren't as strong as they used to be, but they were still clinging on a little bit. So it was that atmosphere that led to Father Ted and led to us. And actually, and I don't mean this as a criticism against Niall, the editor. It was also slightly kicking against Niall, because it was kicking both against the conservatism and the reaction to the conservatism.
That's a good point you're making, because back, I think Father Ted probably came out, was it the mid-90s? Mid-90s, yeah. And it's like, it's hard to understand just how radical it was to put three priests on an island, three Irish priests on an island in 1994 and not say anything negative about them. That was kind of, that was the shocking part, I mean, apart from, of course, they were venal.
No, but you make the point that you make that in the whole series you make, I think, one reference. I think, as you said, in the book you mentioned that you made one reference to the paedophile scandal in the priesthood in Ireland. But really, that you from the outset you were like, that's not what we're about. That's not what we're here for. Yeah. Somebody else can do that kind of work, but that you weren't doing that. And actually, I actually think that's one of the real big strengths of the show. Actually, is that it doesn't go for that sort of cheap. Kind of in a way that's cheap or easy, kind of an easy humor thing that could have been done, but instead of that, it's much more sophisticated and gentle. I describe it as gentle as well. What a brilliant series! I see that you mention a lot. You loved Seinfeld, and I think you got a lot of your inspiration from Seinfeld.
Yes, I mean certainly in by around the third series, the structure was very heavily influenced by Seinfeld. The way they had kind of running parallel storylines that came together at the end.
I suppose we don't want to talk too much about it. We want to get on to the book.
Yes.
The book. Here's the book. But you made a great point.
Well, the book does concern itself mostly with my comedy career. So
that's true. Yeah,
people have asked me about it, so this is great.
And the book is like two books actually. Yeah. People have said that.
It's very distinctly two books. For me, it felt like the first more than the first half is about your comedy writing and your theories about comedy and sitcoms and brilliant points, including one that I thought was fantastic about Shakespearean audiences at the time that Shakespeare
and the argument between commercial and non-commercial.
Yeah, in our career we've met some types.
Some writers.
Let's just say we've met some writers, and there's one particular writer who made a huge point, and I loved this because it really resonated when I was reading your book. This writer who said, "Oh, I don't want to be commercial," and it's like, "Oh, okay, you want to write."
For your friend.
Not for people, or not for. And you make this really good point about Shakespeare. Why don't you tell us the point?
Because Shakespeare was commercial.
That Shakespeare was super commercial because the people in the audience had knives. Can you?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I was just kind of. I think I used it more to kind of explain why I like filming in front of studio audiences. They're very kind of looked down upon by a lot of people in comedy, and they suddenly went out of fashion, and the phrase canned laughter became kind of ubiquitous, even though canned laughter is not used. It's a real audience. And I just kind of I think a lot of the big thing we kept hearing in the arguments against studio audiences was, I don't need to be told when to laugh. And my point is that I didn't use the audience to tell people when to laugh. I used the audience to tell us when we were being funny.
Yeah.
To me, studio audiences allow for a slightly different feel. It's slightly more elevated performances, and the jokes have to be properly solid with a very well constructed. They all have to be very well constructed so that the whole audience knows their jokes, and it just makes for a different style. I'm also a huge fan of the more subtle, understated show, but the thing I always gravitated towards was big laughs. Sorry, I've got WhatsApp on. I'll turn that off. Big laughs, big set piece moments. The things I was trying to emulate was really Fawlty Towers, where a set piece would lead to such a kind of sustained moment of laughter that you would be red-faced watching it. You would be finding it hard to catch your breath.
Yeah,
and that's what I wanted. And I feel that audiences, they bring that out of you because, I would be writing things and be like, this isn't going to get a laugh, so it's gone. And I actually had an editor on, or a producer on the IT Crowd, and he was very funny because he was so savage. Everything that didn't get a laugh, it was gone. And so I'd be like, oh, this is a nice moment when they sort of exchange a glance here, and I'd look over at him in the editing room, and he'd be like,
yeah, it's going.
Yeah,
that's going.
It was like, yeah, and so what it became was like this incredibly condensed ball of laughter, it's just something. So Shakespeare was under even more pressure doing the plays every night. The audiences who had knives, and who was like, and I genuinely think that it was the added pressure of the audiences that made Shakespeare as good as he was.
I mean, it's
I
people.
had to be careful there because I
Go ahead.
didn't want people thinking I was comparing myself to Shakespeare.
No.
I
But
didn't want people
people
thinking I was comparing myself to Shakespeare.
No, but people should think that, it's a nice discipline. Think that your audience all are carrying guns or have knives, right? And are prepared to use them. Imagine if you were writing like that, saying my audience has guns, and it's not that they're not going to walk out. They're going to shoot me if I don't make them laugh. It's a good,
Well, I think that's a little bit hard. Yeah. As somebody who has, and I really appreciated you writing about your stand-up career, and I know that you've reignited it recently. I have tried to do stand-up comedy a few times, and the concept of thinking film that on top of everything else people had guns would be really, it's bad enough as it is, by the way, but to think that they could shoot
well, they don't need guns. I mean, not laughing is punishment enough. It's so terrifying to like, every time you tell a joke, you're kind of you're taking an educated guess that something you found funny will translate to a wide cross section of society. So when that doesn't happen, it's pretty nerve-wracking.
Okay, I know.
Can I just ask a question, Joe? Just on stand-up, because I'm just curious now that we're on that, because when you talk about a wide cross section, because it's interesting. I played to a very friendly crowd, by the way. It was during COVID, and it was very COVID-based humour, which wouldn't be for everyone, right? But nowadays, right? I think in the book you say that you've talked to people who are on the circuit. Like, what is the circuit like now if you do appear in front of a cross section of... Do people literally look at each other and go, is it okay for me to laugh now? Can I laugh at that? Do they do that shit? Or do people actually behave like normal human beings?
Well, I have a very specific experience because the place where I perform is called the Backyard Comedy Club, and it's really just, they only put on people who've been cancelled and people who are kind of free speech figures in some way. And as a result, you get a very sympathetic crowd. It's funny. Like my observation recently, I get there's a lot of goodwill for me when I get up on stage. I even get standing ovations sometimes when I walk up on stage, and I think, oh, God bless you. But my line is I always get a better reaction at the start of a gig than at the end. If it wasn't for my material, I'd be the best comic in the world.
No,
that's unfair.
That's unfair. Yeah.
So talking of your material,
no. Well,
go on.
I like making fun of myself.
Okay.
So
it's always been my style.
What did you think of my point that Derry Girls is very heavily reliant on Father Ted?
I haven't really watched Derry Girls because one of the cast was one of the people who kind of tried to cancel me, and actually Nicola Coughlan, her name is, and she actually asked Twitter to remove me from Twitter. So I don't really have any love for that show or for Hat Trick, who cancelled the Father Ted musical, which I'm sure we'll speak about.
My point is, like, Derry Girls, funny enough, is set in the mid-90s in Ireland, right? And it's set in the Troubles, which was, dominated by one thing, but it doesn't really talk about the Troubles. It talks about people living and the Troubles almost as a kind of a backdrop, but not even there at all, right? And it just struck me as and I have a friend, John Waters, who says 1994 was the most perfect year in Irish history, in the sense that it was coming out of, people had a bit of money and were coming out of kind of getting rid of some of the shackles, but also hadn't gone completely crazy woke mad, right? So there was this, and so it's very interesting that
true.
Both hit series, Father Ted and Derry Girls, are both set in this mid-90s time when you could do that. So anyway, if you haven't seen it, I just felt that it's very interesting that two of the best comedy series about Ireland in the last 40 years were both set in 1994, or 1993.
Yeah.
So
the second half of the book. Go on.
You had all these hit series. Tell us, how did it all go wrong? Where did it start? And do you remember, was it a tweet and were you surprised by the reaction?
I just noticed people using the word TERFs about women, and I was like, I quickly realized that it was a slur. It was a slur, and it seemed to be aimed at women who were standing up for their rights in the most basic way, arguing for fair sports, single-sex spaces, and non-medicalization of children. These things seem to me entirely sensible. So I think, after a while, I just thought, why am I even nervous of getting into this debate? The positions of the TERFs are so obviously clearly correct, and the positions of the opposition were so incoherent, misogynistic, homophobic, which was a surprising aspect, and dangerous to children and children's health, especially gender non-conforming, gay or autistic children. Uh, so I just thought, well, all these things together mean you kind of have to talk about it, because if you're not talking about it, then you're allowing people to undergo the most appalling harassment, and so I stepped in. I genuinely did not think it would destroy everything I had. I kind of felt that I had the Father Ted musical as collateral. That was going to be my pension. But of course, they got to that too, and Hat Trick Productions have kind of preemptively banned it.
So
anyway, yes.
No,
so it was just a kind of combination of seeing the arguments online, following it for a while. I did what a lot of people do who get into this debate. I did my reading. I kind of thought, okay, am I absolutely sure that my position is correct on this? And I looked at everything and I thought, yeah, it's airtight. But unfortunately, I quickly realized that we were up against people for whom airtight arguments and logic don't really matter. They just operate purely on the basis of whether they think they're being nice. And unfortunately, I found out that those people, Nicola Coughlan being one of them, are completely insane in terms of how they respond to this debate.
Tell us about Nicola Coughlan.
Well, that's all I know. All I know is that she tried to get me taken off Twitter and called me a bigot, and just helped the general kind of
pile-on
atmosphere around me. Yeah, the pile-on and the feeling that I was doing something wrong.
You might be the first man in history then to get testicular cancer and say it wasn't the worst thing that happened to you. Tell me what happened that made you think testicular cancer, what a relief.
Yeah. I as I often say, I wish I'd taken the time to enjoy it a bit more. It was the kind of last time I was able to relax. Was in the hospital bed. Since then, it's been like fires breaking out all the time. And each one of them was kind of adding on to the previous one to further destroy my reputation. Pink News started writing hit pieces on me. By now, over the last 5-6 years, they've written over 75 hit pieces about me. Those hit pieces now kind of form the basis of my Wikipedia entry. It was just a kind of all-out attempt to portray me as a bigot and a kind of anti-LGBT person. Even people who are ostensibly on my side sometimes describe me as anti-trans, which I'm certainly not. I have lots of trans-identified friends who agree with me on this and are treated terribly by trans activists. But it was just, it just became out of control just so fast, so quickly. And I think one of the reasons it got out of control so quickly was because I'd written shows that were so beloved by the Irish and then by the kind of IT people or people in computers. Like the same way that J.K. Rowling's work is so important to multiple generations, same generations who were trying to cancel her, they took extra kind of delight in trying to destroy her as well. So it's kind of like it's been very tough ever since I had cancer. And the cancer, literally was the last time I remember being able to relax.
I mean, it's funny you should say you did your reading. And if you listen to I'm sure you've listened to the J.K. Rowling podcast, the witch trials of J.K. Rowling, or the trials of J.K. Rowling. I mean, that's one thing that comes out there. She really did her reading. She did exactly what you did. She thought, this doesn't seem right, but am I wrong? Because actually, I think the problem with you liberals is that all your friends were saying it. Right, and I'm using, you're from a liberal background. I don't know where you are now, but I mean, all your friends, all the people you were friends with were saying it probably, and people that you'd hung out with and had drinks with and all, and you were thinking, well, these are the nice people. Surely surely they've done their research, and there's something I'm missing. Is that the way it was, or?
Yeah, a little bit. And also there were some arguments that when I first heard them, they sounded, and this is why they used them, they had a kind of authentic feel to them. Like I remember one early argument that I briefly fell for, was when they said, oh, trans people have always existed. They're just getting brave now and coming out of the closet. And, that makes sense for about 5 seconds. Until, it's like, here's my biggest argument against that. If trans people have existed throughout history, then Shakespeare would have noticed, because he noticed everything else about humanity.
Yes.
So the fact that there's an entire cohort of humanity that he didn't mention is a sure sign that that's a nonsense argument. But unfortunately, I don't think anyone fell for the arguments for long. But what did happen, and this is where I'm so disappointed by my friends and colleagues, they just didn't think it was important enough to get involved. And so women, I remember telling 2 colleagues on the Father Ted musical that women were losing their sports. And the reaction was just kind of sniggering, it was just seen as beneath, their something that was just not even worth considering. Yeah. And these are 2 people who'd be watching every World Cup. But if something happens to the World Cup to make it unfair, they'd be all over it. But it happens to women, it's just something to snigger about, And the other thing I noticed was that a lot of my friends, the men, were very, it seemed to me, I figured out pretty quickly that they were outsourcing their opinion on the issue to their wives. Because they would say, I heard from multiple people, my wife says it's not a problem. And this was always people who were extremely comfortable, and their wives will never need a shelter or a rape crisis center, God willing, or any other kind of thing that some of the what you might call the forgotten have to deal with.
Yes.
Yes. And they were all kind of behaving like this, and I was in touch with rape crisis victims who couldn't attend rape crisis services, or rape crisis service in Scotland, because of the atmosphere up there, because the fact that the rape crisis Edinburgh, I think it is run by a trans-identified male who did not tell them in the interview that he was a man. I was hearing stories like that. I was hearing stories like a man who was telling me that his daughter was disappearing before his eyes because she was taking testosterone, and he couldn't stop her, even though he knew the effects on her health would be irreparable. Mm-hmm. I met a therapist who said that kids were coming into her distraught because they had been told that J.K. Rowling wanted to kill them. And she said, I can't tell them it's not true because they might report me to my accreditation body,
Just to look at the headlines this morning, the Endometriosis Society, one of them in the UK, have just appointed a man as their CEO, a trans-identified man.
And the reason we know that, Graham, is because you tweeted about it yesterday. When I saw that first, where you did the tweet, I won't repeat it because our listeners are all delicate on the language front, but you were like, WTF, basically, and then you had that piece, and I'm looking at it, and it wasn't immediately clear, by the way, and then I read your second tweet, and it was like, are you absolutely kidding me here. So endometriosis, which is this disease, by the way, which, by the way, is quite political because and I happen to know someone who has endometriosis, and it's a complete frickin' nightmare. And one of the biggest problems with it is that it's never really been taken seriously because it's kind of very, a lot of women were treated like they were hysterical or they were making it up or, it just,
Well, it's very hard to diagnose,
and it's very hard to diagnose. But then in the midst of all of this, where there's now this resurgent thing where it's like, look, this happens to women, it's really awful, and we need to take it super, super seriously. Yeah. Scotland have decided, I think it's Scotland, right, have decided to make the CEO of the Endometriosis Society be this trans woman.
This a man pretending to be on.
A man dressed up as a woman is and it's like, okay, we're not going to take this seriously. Actually, you know what? We're actually not going to take this seriously.
There's more important things.
Yeah. We're gonna have somebody who couldn't possibly begin to understand what it's like to have endometriosis be the person in charge of making this the proper issue that it should be. It's a joke, but we've so many questions.
Not
for you,
only
Graham.
that, but the bloke in question has written terrible things about women. Is obviously misogynist. Has no idea about boundaries. He's known. He's well known. When I tweeted about him last night, about I would say 5 or 6 different women wrote me emails telling me facts about him. And we're about to publish a new piece about him to kind of collect some of this stuff.
When you're on that, just what is the name of your website, by the way, Graham? Just let people know.
Substack.
Oh, your Substack. I think you have a website as well.
My Substack is called the Glinner Update. At the moment, I'm it's really just a kind of regular thing, publishing my friend JL's kind of updates on the week's events. We call it a week in the war on women, and she's been just cataloging that every week, doing a brilliant job. I haven't been adding to it as much as I'd like recently because I've been publicizing the book, but yeah, it's a good old website. But so she's written something about him.
GLINNER, Glinner Update. Yeah, is that it?
So yeah, this is it's just one of the things that I don't think people are aware enough of is that a lot of trans rights activism is trolling. It's simply trolling women. It's like trying to find the thing that will hurt, offend, or annoy women the most, and then doing it. And in a way, it's kind of good for us because, I believe Lenin used to say, worse is better. And when these people do something as violently insulting as make a male a CEO of I won't try and pronounce it, a group that's supposed to be helping women's health, especially something, as you say, as fraught as that condition, because it is, as you say, women are often told they're being hysterical when they're complaining about it. It's a disgraceful action.
That's wild.
Especially a misogynist, which he is.
Unbelievable.
And it's so. But again, the more people see the nature of this activism, the more they realize, oh, hang on a sec, this isn't really about a vulnerable minority. This is about men exercising their power over women, and there is certainly a vulnerable minority in there. But our problem at the moment is it's very hard to see the wood from the trees. I don't know if you know this, but transsexuals there's a nickname for transsexuals among trans rights activists. They call them true scum because they don't. They think that they're kind of being too true scum. TRUSCUM, and it means a transsexual like my friend Debbie Hayton, who has had an operation and does suffer from dysphoria to the extent that he had something done, and they think that's they don't like that because they want to make the experience of being transgender as ill-defined and easy to access as possible. So you have blokes who, my favorite thing is, they put a bit of black fingernail polish on and then they're walking into women's toilets. These are kind of like what you might call trans tourists who don't have dysphoria.
Yeah.
who don't have dysphoria and are often, people who enjoy breaking boundaries and enjoy annoying people and enjoy trolling people. So I think once people realize that what this movement is to a large extent is the kind of what I call the real revenge of the nerds. It's a lot of men who spent a lot of time in front of computers, a lot of time looking at pornography, and a lot of time insulting and arguing with women online. And they found a cheat code that allowed them not only to continue doing all the things they love doing, but to do all these things while being called the most vulnerable minority on earth.
No, I just want to remind people we're here talking to Graham Linehan about his book Tough Crowd, how I made and lost a career in comedy. And he lost the career in comedy because he called out the trans madness. And you've another question there.
Well, I'm not sure I want to go on to. I have so many questions, but let me.
I want to ask Graham one now. Graham, you talked earlier about Pink News. I read in Pink News that your book hasn't even broken into the top 1,000 on Amazon.
That's right.
Why are we interviewing such a failure?
Yeah.
Even Pink News will publish something even if the proof of it exists online. They just want to create a kind of separate reality that all their readers and supporters will believe. And these are things that can be parroted over and over again. And again, I sometimes call it a tiered reality, like basically the people who read Pink News believe an entirely different set of facts that the people who read the Times, say, believe, So,
can I just say something? I met you in Dublin a couple of months ago on the street. Mm-hmm. And at that stage, you had tweeted out that your book was number 3 on the Amazon bestsellers list. And I stopped you. I just walked past, and there you were on the street. I goes, "Excuse me, Graham, you're a liar. It's actually number 2 on the," and I have it. Hopefully, I can find that screenshot. It was actually number 2 on the Amazon bestseller list, right? Remember, I stopped you, and you thought, "Who's this weirdo guy stopping me in the street of Dublin?" And it's there. It was number 2, right? And Pink News,
the beloved, and by the way, the beloved internet was reporting this. By the way, their beloved internet,
and they're now saying it never broke the top 1,000, and it's just like, I mean, who went into journalism to do that?
Basically, Pink News is set up to kind of protect the people who are working for it. Like the editor is married to an ex-trustee of mermaids, and people who have any involvement with mermaids are heavily invested in destroying the reputation of people who kind of come out against them. Mermaids is under investigation at the moment, and I think that soon it will be considered one of the greatest medical scandals of all time, that what they were allowed to do. And they're not even like slowing down. Ben Cohen, who's the editor, he also teamed up with Snapchat to encourage young women to get double mastectomies. They even used the term trans joy to describe this. So these are extremely dangerous people who will do everything they can to cover up the fact that they've been involved in an atrocity. I think that the mutilation of these kids is a modern atrocity, and I guess they'll just do everything they can to destroy my any chance of me being heard on this.
One of the things, so the second half of the book, which starts with interlude, I mean, it's very sad. I mean, the story of what happened to you is just horrific, and the stuff of nightmares, that you went from being the toast of the town and people just loving you all over the place, to having the people that you loved most in the world, like, basically turn on you, and you've lost so much. But to think of something sort of on a sort of cheerful note. I mean, I am very focused on the fact that you did lose a lot of friends, and I would want to ask you about that, how you cope from day to day with that loss. But in the midst of all of that, you've had this kind of extraordinary thing where you've made all these new friends, and one of them jumped out at me, who is actually an old friend of ours from back in the day, because we used to work in as journalists in Romania, and Baroness Emma Nicholson came across our path back then, and we were great buddies of hers for a number of years. We're working on the issue of international adoption, and she's a rock star on that subject. But I love the fact. So Baroness Emma Nicholson from the House of Lords, former Conservative, now
Liberal Democrat, independent now. I think she's independent.
Tell us, and I mean, she was a big enough age back then when we knew her. She's obviously, I think she might be 90 now. Tell us what happened. She asked you out on a date. Let's just put it that way. Why did she do that? And tell us about that occasion, because actually it's a very interesting story.
Oh yeah, well, her husband was was a man named Michael Caine, obviously not the Michael Caine, who was one of the people who was responsible for setting up the Booker Prize in the UK, which is the most famous literary prize in London, in England, and yeah, she started defending women, and she was disinvited from the ceremony. You know, I went along with her. They kind of stuck their toe back in the water by inviting her to an announcement of the nominees one year, and I went along with her, which probably didn't do much.
That's called trolling, I think.
But you know, she's just been treated disgracefully.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, publishing is one of those worlds that has been completely captured by this ideology, and they and also the men who are kind of aiding the cancellation attempts on Nicholson, on Emma, are men who, you know, we always do the same thing whenever a man starts abusing a woman on behalf of quote unquote trans rights, we always run the word tranny through a search engine and the advanced search on Twitter, and sure enough, they're always throwing it around the place about 5 or 6 years ago, you know? So what you have is a group of men who, when it was fashionable, they called trans people trannies. Mm-hmm. And now that it's fashionable not to, they're calling the women who are fighting this stuff nasty names and getting them cancelled from an evening that her husband set up.
Oh my God!
You know, so
unbelievable!
It's a vicious thing
horrible
to do to her.
For those who don't know, in the Booker Prize, it's one of the most prestigious literary prizes
on the planet.
It's just below the Nobel Prize. It's one of the top. I think it's probably the second most prestigious. Maybe there's a Pulitzer, might be. You know, it's up. It's the Commonwealth Pulitzer. You know, it's a massive thing. And her husband set it up, and now they've disinvited her from the ceremony because of her opinions about women, and she's a woman, and she's a deaf woman, by the way. Yeah. I'm not trying to gain her Olympic
and
suffering.
Not just that, as you said earlier, she's also someone who has done an incredible amount for children who otherwise would have been just left on a scrap heap. You know, she's rescued children. In fact, literally rescued them sometimes. Someone once told me, I spoke to, I can't remember who he was, but he had something to do with the embassy in Iraq. And he said one day he was in the embassy in London, the UK embassy, and he picked up the phone, and it was Emma, and she shouted down the phone, "Open the borders!" And what it was she had rescued 2 children and was driving them across the, you know,
one of them,
country,
I know one of them had severe burns, and she was taking him to the UK. He was a teenager, so I'm taking him to the UK for treatment. But you know, she was born deaf. It wasn't diagnosed, so she was thought to be stupid, etc. She just went from one.
She's a good person to kind of. I know you guys are probably more on the right than I am, but she is probably the person who changed my attitude about the right, in the sense that I used to have this kind of lazy assumption that right wing people weren't thinking through the issues. Oh boy, was that wrong! Weren't thinking through the issues. We're not compassionate. We're racist and all sorts of other ists. And meeting her, she was an assistant. She was Margaret Thatcher's assistant. I mean, you can't get closer to a kind of right-wing figure in the UK than that. But she's just a wonderful person. She's the most decent, humane, thoughtful, respectful fighter for the underprivileged and for the weak. She's a hero.
Cool. I loved when you mentioned her in the book, because I just thought, oh my God, here's Emma again doing a real Emma thing, and even the way you described her, because she's got a terribly correct voice and whatever. And I just remember when we knew her very well in Romania, and the kind of work that she did, and she was, she's a real fighter. I mean, and she's not scared of anything. And I just thought, in the midst of this controversy over the Booker Prize, what does she decide to do? They're letting her put her toe back in the water. And she says, oh yeah, I'm going to bring a date, by the way. And she chooses to bring you. And it's like, good for you, Emma. Go girlfriend.
I mean, Manny's a person at her age would be retiring and taking it easy. And she's still there, ready for the fight.
I don't hear from her as much as I used to. I hope she's still flourishing, because she's just one. And also, she is a brilliant. She's one of these people who gets stuff done.
Yes.
Like if she sees something is happening, she will write a letter to the person you have to write a letter to, and it'll be on her with her letterhead, the House of Lords on it. And she gave me some great advice as well, some great activism advice. She said, whenever you write a letter to someone, write a letter to someone else saying that you've written the letter to the first person. Because it's not enough to write a letter. You have to let people know that you've written a letter. So she's great. Like, I just think she's one of the, and before all this is one of the advantages, one of the good things that's happened to me, which kind of spins us back into where you started with this conversation. But in the old days, I really only knew people in television, which was fine, but it was just a very kind of, I would say, samey group of people, maybe.
Yeah.
Whereas in this fight, I meet so many different types who have such a wide range of experience, from people like Emma, who's in the House of Lords, to people like Tish, my friend, who's like, a mother just trying to save her son from doing something terrible to himself. If in terms of, it's almost a shame it didn't happen earlier in a way, because it's great for a writer to have such a wide range of people to think about and to draw from, So she's a very good example of ways in which my life has been enriched. It's tough still, because these are not people like my natural crowd are people who don't take anything seriously, who you cannot talk about a serious issue because they will joke about it and they will make fun of you for taking it seriously. That's my usual crowd. But unfortunately, they as an apolitical bunch, they just have no interest in getting involved in this debate, So, yeah, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things that I think I've noticed, and I've heard this from people on the right, is they've formed these really weird allegiances and have become friends with the most people they would never have imagined. Like, I'm just thinking of a friend of mine who's very involved in this fight, and he's very religious, evangelical Christian. You don't get much more right wing than that, and has formed a relationship with Martina Navratilova and
lesbians. He's big with the lesbians.
And he's really, as he says, he's really big with the lesbians now. And it because I think it's bigger. This issue is bigger than just about everything else. And I have a couple of questions. One question I have: is there anything in history that you think that can come even approximately come anywhere close to this madness. I mean, we often mention eugenics, but I actually don't think eugenics was as... I just think there's something different about eugenics and this. I think this is stratospherically more awful.
Yes, although what I would say is that this, for me, reminds me most of what happened just after the printing press was invented, which was basically the Reformation happened, and also a number of kind of spin-offs of the Reformation. Like the Reformation was the successful one, but there were a number of religious manias that accompanied the Reformation around the same time, just before or after, and they were like full of things like massacres and end of the world predictions that never came true and stuff like this. And essentially, what's happened is the internet is like the printing press multiplied by a billion, and there's other things as well with it. I mean, I joke about this, but I genuinely mean it. Things like spell check, they make crazy people sound sane. So what you have is like you have a kind of and AI will make it even worse, because what you can do with AI is you could put in a crazy screed and say, make this sound normal, and it will, and then you can send that off, and people think, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. No, he doesn't. He's just a crazy guy.
It's so funny you should say that, because as a journalist working in Ireland in the 90s, like I did, and after, I mean, you regularly got letters written in green ink. You always, it's one of these green ink letters, right? Or sometimes it was red ink as well.
This will make me stand out. That's what they thought. This will make me stand out.
Yeah.
They won't ignore this.
Yes, and it's 20 pages of tightly written madness, right? Badly spelled, not logical at all. But as you say, now they can send you an email that has spell checked and has got a grammar check on it.
Yeah.
It gives them this layer. Back then, you had a collection of letters in green ink. Now they all look. There's no more green ink.
And what's particularly dangerous about this is that it can make crazy opinions get a kind of new life. Like one of the things about the trans rights movement is it's so incredibly homophobic. The idea that like a lesbian can have a penis is pure homophobia. And then also you've seen what recently happened after October 7, which was an extraordinary convulsion of anti-Semitism around the world. And it's not just anti-Semitism, it's unembarrassed anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Anti-Semitism that's not ashamed of showing its face.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's because I think that all these old ancient prejudices have been given a shine by the internet, memes and stuff like that. They just make it feel new. They make it feel like these people are stepping outside the norm. But it's like, no, you're not. You're just doing what people have done for forever. You're hating Jews, you're hating women, and you're hating gay people. But it all, again, like the green ink, because it's not written in green ink, everyone thinks it's a fresh perspective.
We're coming to the end of the interview, Graham, but I want to ask you, where are we in this war? I mean, Phelim and I make this distinction between the United States and the UK. The UK seem to be doing a lot better than the United States. So the madness it has complete hold here. There's no pushback of any kind really going on here that's getting anywhere. Whereas in the UK, obviously with the closure of Tavistock and a number of those investigations, it feels like there's some progress. Where do you think you are in this war with rationality?
Funnily enough, the Tavistock may have closed, but Kathleen Stock recently and Hannah Barnes recently revealed that some of the old doctors who were the problem in the Tavistock have just moved to these new centres. And I think, yeah. And someone said that they're actually working alongside the people who blew the whistle on them. So this is like gender ideology is like a weed. It's not going to disappear by by being uprooted in one particular area. It needs like root and branch work, and that's not going to change until until the ideology is completely dismissed, or what's the word? The ideology is complete. Yeah, destroyed but I mean, it has to be seen as what it is, which is a busted flush. It's a busted flush. Everyone thought it would change the world. It was this miraculous new thing. People have got to really see that it was the wrong road to go down. It's caused immense misery. It's broken up family and friendships. It is a disaster. And the only way people will see that, I think, is with the cases in America that will be, I think, coming soon.
Lawsuits
people suing their doctors.
Yeah. I agree with you.
I think that even though you say it hasn't advanced as far in America, I think America might be the key to it all falling apart everywhere. Because when people realize how much money is going to be, when the first big settlements are reached, that's going to pull people up quite quickly. And then I think you'll see the doctors start to stop, if that makes sense. And maybe then a little bit of reflection from the people who've been pushing it.
No, I agree with you. I think that, funny enough though, I've been wrong before, because I actually thought when the sports thing started, the minute the sports thing started, I thought, okay, no one is going to allow, your darling daughter, no one's going to stand for this. Looking at your darling daughter who's super brilliant at tennis or whatever, who's super brilliant as an athlete, no one's going to stand for the fact that she hasn't got a hope in hell going forward. This is going to be the end of it. Okay, I was wrong about that. And now I'm actually with you on this one. I mean, I can't believe, by the way, so many people are folding onto this, the sports thing. I just can't believe parents are allowing, they look at a child and think, yeah, you're unbelievably talented. I remember years and years ago, I interviewed, what was the name of that gymnast film?
Nadia Comaneci.
Who was basically from the day she was born, she was doing handstands before she could walk, So there's people who are born like that, who are unbelievably talented in sports. I'm not that kind of person, but I admire those that are. But the idea that you'd have a child that you'd look at them and think, okay, this is one of those incredible kids, hasn't got a hope in hell ever of getting like the scholarship or whatever, or getting on the great team. I thought that would stop everyone. I thought everyone would agree on that and say, okay, enough is enough now. If you have a penis, you are not a girl. I thought that was going to be the end of it, but no. But I do agree with you. I think the law is a good possibility.
I think it has to be a multi-pronged.
It has to be everything.
It has to be made fun of. It has to be taken politically, has to be taken down, but it also in terms of lawsuits. And I mean, America is further behind because the Democrats have completely bought into this. Yeah. So it's divided along left, right here. And now there are states that are leading the charge, but they're all red states. However, the thing in Britain is that there are many from the left who have spoken out and are starting to speak out more so than in the United States. And that's just an observation from afar. Maybe it's different if you're there.
I think that's true. And also, I mean, I don't know what's been keeping the Tories. I guess my feeling is that there are a lot of kind of right conservative parties and conservative people are sitting on this as an issue until they need to use it in an election. I think once that happens, you'll see it start to flare up a lot, because it's a winning ticket. It's a winning ticket. As you say, do you want to protect your daughters from losing their medal? I met a woman the other day. Her daughter was a jiu-jitsu silver medalist. She's given it up. She's given it up because of the men in the sport. I think that's recently changed, but maybe it's too late to keep her in the sport. But once a big publicity machine like conservatives will have when they're running for election again starts to interview these people in well lit studios, then with music as swelling behind their testimonies, I think things might turn around quite quickly.
I don't know why they're not making an issue now. I mean, why they're not using it to I
It's
mean,
just not electorally advantageous when there's not an election on. I think they're just sitting on it. To me, it's like they have this issue is like an atomic bomb for the right. They just have to drop it, and it's all, and they win. They win elections. So in a way, it's like it's.
I have to disagree. I mean, I have to not disagree with you, but I have to disagree with them. Like, elections are not won in the last 3 weeks of the election campaign, right? Yeah. People are smarter than that now. People are saying you're just using that. You're just, where were you when, you know?
Back then.
You know, cops are calling to people's doors in the UK, arresting them as Northumbria police just did last week, arrested a woman who for tweeting trans men are not women, you know, or trans women. Men with penises are not women. And next thing she's been arrested. And questioned. So, you know, people see that.
Questioned rather than arrested,
Questioned rather than arrested, exactly. Yeah.
So
we're coming to the end. What's next for you, Graham?
I don't know. I mean, you know, I feel like it's hard for me to write anything creative when I worked for 3 years on the Father Ted musical and they're refusing to make it. I feel like I'm just going to keep trying to apply pressure to Hat-Trick to release it so that we can make it. I'll put it on in a pub if I have to, you know. It's a brilliant piece of work. It's extremely funny. The songs are amazing. It's just great.
Can I just we didn't get talking about it there.
Keep fighting for it.
We didn't get talking about it. So you had Father Ted the musical, which of course is a brilliant idea, one of the most popular sitcoms, and there's a lot of 90s nostalgia around at the moment. You know, the 80s nostalgia and the 90s. And you had a Father Ted musical that you worked on for maybe 10 years. So it's going to be funny. It was going to be irreverent. It was going to be wonderful.
About three or 4 years.
Yeah, and. You walked into a meeting in Hat-Trick, which are the producers, and they said, yeah, we're going to make it, but you have to take your name off it because you're toxic. And
we'll give you money. Can you go away, please?
And you refused it.
They offered me £200,000 to walk away from it. Yeah. And I told them, in the end, I just felt that, you know, the kids being damaged by this ideology and the women and men losing their livelihoods because of this ideology it was more important to try and draw attention to that and to stick to my principles. I've not done anything wrong, you know, beyond sometimes letting my frustration getting the better of me and getting angry in exchanges, usually with people who are sending me dogs abuse, you know. And I refuse to behave as if I've done anything wrong. And you know, my unfortunate mistake that I made was betting on my friends, was thinking that my friends would back me up, but none of them have had the courage to do so. You know? Just
on that one, I mean, that I actually put 2 marks in the book at the beginning, and both of them refer to where you're describing the pain of betrayal and the pain of, you know, running this race and turning around to find that there's nobody with you, that the people that you expected to turn up didn't. You kept thinking they're going to turn up, people are going to turn up, and they didn't. I can't imagine that is not one that will be easily healed. That pain will not easily go away. I can't imagine how that goes away.
Oh, someone was talking about one of my friends the other night, and they were saying, give them a call, you know, and I thought, well, it's really not up to me to give them a call, you know. I like over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been completely isolated from any kind of normal existence because my friends did not stand up for me. Just let me be they let me swing in the wind, basically. And you know, I don't know. I just feel like I could, you know, I don't want to be over dramatic, but Gillian Phillip, who's a cancelled author in Scotland, she said this as well. The ultimate aim of these people who are trying to destroy my livelihood and trying to destroy my reputation is they want me to kill myself, you know. And had I not had something to do, which was my blog and my if I hadn't had that blog, I could well be dead by now, you know. And the fact that my friends, you know, Neil Hannon, Arthur Matthews, you know, my colleagues, Jimmy Mulville and all these people allowed that to happen to me, I don't know. I think it just speaks for itself.
Yeah, no, it's Yeah, I mean, we're very glad you're here, and
Yes.
I think, you know, and if it's any good at all, we're going to remind you of how incredibly important it is, and having somebody like you and J.K. Rowling, like, I mean, are doing, you know, God's work. I mean, so those of us who believe in God would describe it as that, because people have to stand up. This is, as you say, and you describe it so well in the book, and we haven't really talked too much about that, and we are coming to the end of the interview, but basically what is going on, the butchery that's going on, that's forever, by the way. Those children that already have been hurt are hurt forever. There's no recovering. As Abigail Schreier says, irreversible damage. It's irreversible. You know, osteoporosis from taking these drugs, but double mastectomy, which, you know, anyone who says top surgery needs to be punched. Sorry, I've just said that on my podcast. But, you know, anyone who says, you know, top surgery, you know, and funny, I actually did that myself one time. I said it to somebody, and they basically didn't quite punch me, but they should have. You know, we can't give in to that language. It's a double mastectomy. It's a freaking double mastectomy. Why not call it that? It was always called mastectomy. Why would it suddenly be called something different? And it's because they hate the language that describes what they're actually doing, and all the stuff that they're doing with stuff beneath the belt is just. I've unfortunately accidentally seen some of those photographs of what they do with penises and with vaginas. It's the Nazis hadn't a clue that the Nazis were only getting going. You know, when you think about it in comparison.
As someone said, it's 100% failure rate for these operations. 100% failure rate. There's no, you know, and there's a guy recently who's becoming in America the face of regret about these surgeries. He was 22 years old. He's 22 years old now. He and his family were told by doctors that the operation would turn him into an actual woman. They literally believed he would turn into a real woman. And now he's basically a 22-year-old gay man whose sexuality has been destroyed by these bastards, you know? So, yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things to always be on guard against is this language they use to try and hide what they're doing. You know, totally agree.
And by the way, okay, I really am going to stop. But I presume you don't mention her in the book, but I presume you've come across the Irish woman in Florida called 𝙤𝙤 𝙤𝙤. Am I saying her name correctly?
She was one of his doctors. She was one of his doctors.
Oh my God!
The person I just spoke about.
Oh yeah, and you've seen her horrific TikToks. That the TikToks alone should get her taken off any medical.
Give her a medal now.
Certification. I mean, unbelievable. Anyway, we are definitely going to stop.
Yes.
Yes. Graham, thank you so much. Okay. Honestly, thanks a million for your time. Everybody, we highly recommend this book. Tough crowd, but also subscribe to Graham's Substack, Glinner, and we'll put all of that up in our show notes, by the way, so people have no difficulty finding Graham.
In the email that we send out, so subscribe to our email too if you want those details as well. And
what we'll do is we'd love to check in with you again, Graham, in maybe 6 months or a year. Please God, you know, things are going to have changed, because this is the fight to be in, and you're fighting the good fight for lots of people, and you're giving people inspiration, even if you didn't inspire people that were very, very close to you. So well done, you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you. So, as we said before, you can get the book on Amazon. You can get the Audible version, which is narrated by Graham himself. And I just think when you know those final moments of the interview there, I mean, it's incredibly tough. I mean,
they wanted him dead.
They basically wanted him dead, and he's very aware of that. And he's lost everything. I mean, we didn't really talk about it during the interview, but his wife has left him, and he has lost his livelihood. He's everything. So he was king of the world, and you know was doing something great. By the way, he was making the whole world laugh. By the way, you know that's what his job was. He was making the whole world laugh, and he's a big believer in commercial humor, in making it so that it's for everyone, that it's for every person, not for the elites. That's the kind of humor he wanted, was for the ordinary people. And they've taken all of that away from him. They've taken everything away from him, and also on top of that, friends that he thought he knew have deserted him. And it's a very tough space to be in. So so please do support him.
Yes.
And
that's the end of the show.
Yeah, that's the end of the show.
We're rushing to catch a plane, basically.
We are. We basically kind of are, actually.
Yes.
But we will. The next time you see us, we will be somewhere in Israel, and we'll let you know. We're not even 100% sure where we're going to land first. So, but we'll be talking to you.
Bye.
Bye bye.